And welcome back to This Week. Time now to get the views of our media and political experts, the former head of the state Democratic Party, Bob Tuke, and syndicated conservative talk show host Steve Gill. Welcome, guys. Another Friday rolls around. Been a lot of news coming out of Afghanistan this week, a lot of deaths of U.S. service members. The president's still mulling over the request for 40,000, possibly more U.S. troops. He says he's not going to make a rush decision. There are those, like Senator John McCain, who says the decision needs to be made quickly.
Well, he has been president now for 10 months, and he was in the Senate as the chief Senate oversight guy for Afghanistan before he got elected president of the United States. So the claim that he doesn't want to be rushed, this is a guy that supposedly knew this issue better than most, was talking during the campaign about this being the right war, what we needed to do. Now he's just not simply doing what he says that must be done. And frankly, I think he's delaying a decision because you've got several important elections next Tuesday. He doesn't want to alienate a Democrat base just before those elections in Virginia, New Jersey, and some other locations. And frankly, I think it's shameful that he's putting politics ahead of policy.
You're a Marine, you've served, you know what the importance of troop levels are.
I think it's real important that he wait. The state of play has changed dramatically in Afghanistan from what it was like even at the beginning of his presidency. With the fraudulent election that occurred, the Karzai government is even more now disreputable. It's critical that they have some kind of election that has some kind of public credibility. I don't want to see our troops risked in a venture that is sounding way, way too much to me like the war I fought. We've got to have a reliable ally on the ground. After all, that is their country. It's not our country. And who we say the enemy is varies according to whom you speak to. You know, is it Al-Qaeda? Somebody said on the radio today there's only 100 Al-Qaeda left. They're all over in Pakistan. I believe that. Well, is it Taliban? Well, Taliban is actually not a government. Taliban is a very extreme side of the religion of Islam. So I think this is no time to rush to it. Been there, done that. I don't like it. I'm glad he's waiting.
The president says he'll probably make a decision mid to early November, which is coming up pretty soon after the election in Afghanistan. And logistically, whether he decides today or 2 weeks from now, it's going to be next spring before he can get 40,000 troops over there. They ordered 10,000 troops last spring. They're not all there yet, and it's going to be winter over there soon.
And that's the least hospitable terrain that you could ever... Well, you've been there. You've seen what it's like. It's absolutely horrible, and in the wintertime it's all the worse, and the helicopters can't get up into the mountains, and I think we shouldn't rush here.
Well, the good news is that during the winter months is when the Pakistanis, the folks on that side of the border that are coming across and causing the problems tend to kind of hunker down as well, because they can't fight as well as we can with the kind of technology we have. The spring offensive is when those troops will really need to be there. But in the meantime, we need to make sure that our troops on the ground understand that they've got a commander-in-chief who understands what's going on, who's committed to doing what's right there and being successful there. And unfortunately, the National Security Advisor, who claimed there were only 100 Al-Qaeda left in Afghanistan, made that pronouncement just before about 400 attacked one of our outposts and killed a lot of American soldiers. So I'm not sure they're getting the straight scoop, or more importantly, telling the American people the
straight scoop. You've been over there, I've been over there, you've served as well. How important is it for the troops that are over there to know that their commander-in-chief is considering these options, looking out for their well-being, and in regard to, it was a sad occasion, but he did take part in the dignified transfer, bringing the remains of Americans killed back here. He was there for that.
The soldiers and Marines who are fighting over there are fighting for one another. That's the way it is when you're in war. You don't think of the big picture. You need to have confidence in your leaders on the ground. You need to have confidence in the leaders in the theater, like General McChrystal. It is also important, however, that the president demonstrate his support for the troops, for the military, which is why I think President Obama's being there to see the dignified transfer is extremely important. That does a lot more for the morale. I'll be honest with you, the average rifleman isn't trying to figure out what the geopolitics of this are. He's trying to figure out how he's going to get through the night.
I think Bob and I would certainly agree that it's more important to get the right decision rather than a rush decision. But this is 10 months into this administration, and ironically, on the same day that the president was playing his 24th round of golf, Sunday is when 14 Americans were killed in Afghanistan. If he's got time for golf, he's got time to sit down and make a decision.
You know, I remember some of my liberal friends making those kinds of remarks about former President Bush, and hearing folks on your side being upset about
Bush
that.
Played less golf in 3 years than this guy's played in 9 months.
He instead was out sawing on tree stumps.
As opposed to doing date nights in New York with his
The
wife.
other big issue in Washington this week, of course, the Democrats, the House has passed or approved a health care reform proposal that is out there with a, quote, modified public option. The Senate has its version out there with no public option. The public option still seems to be the big battleground.
No, there's still a public option in the Senate version. And
it's smaller, though.
It's smaller. And, you know, there's been way too much focus, I think, on the public option, but, you know, I'm not going to get my way. It's going to be it's going to continue to be the focus. But I think at least now we have two bills to look at. People are going to be able to dissect what's actually in the bills instead of, as Steve was saying last week, you know, fluff. We have real bills now, and I'm very hopeful that they're going to, in conference, come up with a good, solid health care reform legislation that will pass. It will, mark my word, it will pass.
I'm sometimes critical of Nancy Pelosi, sometimes, but at least they've put the House bill, the 2,000 pages, on the internet so people can read it. Harry Reid in the Senate has kept that from happening. The American people ought to be able to read this bill, dissect it, see what's in there, because right now they're still funding abortion, they're still funding health care for illegals, they're still cutting Medicare, they're still including the death panels, they're still including all the stuff that was in before. They're just using new words for some of the things, and the American people ought to read it.
And paying for it continues to be the undecided. The administration still claims that they can pay for this without increasing the deficit through elimination of waste, elimination of duplication. But the number is what this is going to cost continues to go up. The House version is now maybe over $1 trillion.
Well, it all depends on how you count it. But keep in mind that the failure to do this is going to cost a whole lot more than either one of those versions is going to cost. We have to keep in mind that health care costs in this country continue to escalate at a rate vastly outstripping the rate of other expenses. And every time we think about what this is going to cost small businesses, we also need to think about what the absence of reform is costing small businesses.
Well, you got to look at also what are the outside of government costs, and even nonpartisan groups are saying this is going to drive up premium costs for the typical American family, $4,000 a year, $1,600 for individuals. It's not just the government cost, which will likely be double what they're talking about. It's the consumer cost as well, and the cut in the quality of care. If they can really save $500, $600 billion in fraud, waste, and abuse, why haven't they already done it? Don't count on that money when they've never been able to cut it before.
30 seconds to go. Will something out of this get passed?
I think yes, absolutely.
I think it depends on what happens in the Tuesday elections. I think if Republicans win the Virginia governor's race, possibly win the New Jersey governor's race, and if an independent wins in New York, the 23rd congressional district, I think you're going to see Democrats fleeing from this administration, Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid, for their lives.
And if this doesn't pass now with 15 seconds, it could be dead for a long time.
I think so. That's why it's critical that it pass.
Bob Tuke, Steve Gill, appreciate your insight. Stay with us. This Week continues in a moment.